Angie Dickinson is one of the most famous and loved stars in Hollywood. She came into the world on September 30, 1931, in Colne, North Dakota. A woman who made a name for herself in the entertainment world over many decades with her looks, skill, and drive. She grew up in a simple home as the second of Frederica and Leo Henry Brown's 3 children. Their names were the owner and editor of a newspaper that they ran. As a child, she moved to Burbank, California, with her family in search of better opportunities. In the middle of the golden age of the American entertainment business, Angie made this choice, which changed her life in every way. She grew up in a small town with traditional values and rules. But her natural charm, intelligence, and self-assurance made it clear that she would have a great future. Angie Dickinson didn't want to be a star at first, but her performances made her popular. She went to Immaculate Heart College in Los Angeles and got a degree in business. After that, she got a job as a secretary. She won a neighborhood beauty pageant, which was the Burbank Miss America qualifier. But fate had other plans. The event not only made her famous, but it also showed her 2 people in the entertainment business, who thought she was both pretty and polished. That same year, she got small parts on TV, which caught the attention of directors who liked how she looked on screen. While she was still young, she quickly proved that she could be both dramatic and attractive in westerns and collection plays like Death Valley Days and The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp. The movie Rio Bravo, which Howard Hawks directed in 1959, was her big break. Dean Martin and John Wayne were also in it. Both audiences and reviewers will never forget Dickinson's performance as Feathers, a strong-willed and funny saloon girl. She was up for a fight with 2 of Hollywood's biggest male stars. At a time when not many Western actors were given roles this difficult, hers was more than just a beautiful one. It showed that they were smart, brave, and independent. She became famous for her part in Rio Bravo, which showed that she was a versatile actress who could take on both dramatic and emotional roles. Over the course of the 1960s and 1970s, Angie Dickinson made one of the best Hollywood records. She was in many types of movies, including rom-coms and thrillers like Point Blank 1967 and The Killers, 1964. Naturally, pretty and sure of herself, she liked working with big names in show business at the time, like Frank Sinatra, Burt Lancaster, and Lee Marvin. People knew her for having a sophisticated charm that was both strong and feminine. She was different from many other women her age because of this. She became close with Hollywood's elite, especially the Rat Pack, outside of work, and joined their flashy, fast-paced world. Dickinson played Sergeant Suzanne Pepper Anderson on the groundbreaking NBC show Policewoman in 1974. This turned out to be the most important thing in her work. Dickinson changed the way women were portrayed on TV when she was one of the first female police investigators to appear in a primetime show. What people thought of the show was good. She won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Television Drama in 1975. After the show had been on for 4 seasons, her role as Pepper Anderson not only showed how good an actress she was, but it also became a sign of strong women at a time when feminist movements were changing American culture. Many female police officers were moved to become police officers after seeing Dickinson's performance. Once Policewoman was over, Angie Dickinson kept working steadily in movies and on TV. She did a great job of changing with the times in the show business. In movies like Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill, 1980, she played a sexually complicated and risky character that showed she was still willing to break the rules as her career went on. She stayed flexible in the 1980s and 1990s by appearing in miniseries, plays, and as a guest star on shows. This showed how famous she was and how hard she worked at her job. She made a nostalgic cameo in Ocean's 11, a remake of the 1960 classic. In 2001, she shared the screen with old friends Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. Fans loved how she was connected to the golden age of Hollywood. People have been interested in Angie Dickinson's love life for a long time, both because of how beautiful she was and how famous she was, and also because of the strong and skilled men she dated. The 2 times she was married were like 2 very different times in her life. The first one took place when she was young and full of fire. The second one happened when she was famous and had a lot of feelings. In 1952, she got married to Gene Dickinson for the first time. Gene was a businessman and a former college football player who made Angie feel safe while she was having trouble getting her Hollywood career off the ground. When Angie got married, she was still getting used to being a young star. Before she got married, she had only made a few small TV appearances and had small parts in movies, even though they had been married for 8 years. Angie's rising fame and the busy nature of the entertainment business often put their marriage to the test. Gene inspired her to reach her goals. According to other people, however, the differences in their lives, she became famous in show business, while he worked in business stored them apart over time. Even so, Angie got her legal last name, Dickinson, from this marriage. She chose to keep this name even after they split up in 1960. It quickly became a sign of how beautiful and sure of herself she was as an actress in Hollywood. 5 years after that, in 1965, Angie Dickinson married Burt Bacharach, who was a famous singer, songwriter, and performer. People in Hollywood talked a lot about their marriage. Their relationship was beautiful, artistic, and very emotional, but it was also very complicated. Bacharach wrote hit songs for Dionne Warwick, Dusty Springfield, and Tom Jones when he was at the top of his game. Angie was a famous star at that point, and she was known for being smart and beautiful. She had been in well-known movies like Rio Bravo and Ocean's 11. As soon as they met, they were known as one of Hollywood's golden couples, and artists praised how smart and successful they were. But behind the beautiful and loving public image of their marriage, there were times when they felt alone, when their jobs were at odds with each other, and when they were both going through terrible things. Their daughter, Leah Nikki Bacharach, was born before she was due in 1966. They loved and cared for Nikki the most. Even though she had long-term health problems and was finally diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, she often talked about how her daughter was both her greatest joy and her biggest challenge. The job Burt had took him all over the world, so Angie had to do a lot of the parenting. In later conversations, she told the truth about how the emotional gap between her and Burt grew over time, even though they still loved each other. After 16 years of marriage, they finally got a divorce in 1981. They both had a really tough time. Even though she and Burt Bacharach were no longer married, Angie Dickinson still talked about him with a lot of love and respect. One time, she said he was the smartest person she had ever met when it came to singing, but she knew it was hard to live with someone so smart. It seemed like Angie and Bacharach's relationship had been very important for both of them, even though it didn't work out in the end, because he often said nice things about her. They both felt very bad when their daughter Nikki died in 2007. Angie only talked about how much she loved her child when she was out in public. Angie Dickinson had a long and interesting career. She worked with some of Hollywood's most famous people and saw amazing things happen between people. Genius, ego, heartache, and amazing behavior. Dickinson is known for being honest and smart, so she has never been afraid to tell the truth about the people she shared the show with. In a very honest chat, she talked about the 7 most damned actors. That wasn't something she said out of anger. She said it because she was drawn to performers who had amazing ability but also had tragic flaws, mental demons, or bad tempers. She used to think that Hollywood was never a place for saints. There, devils who were charming wore charm like perfume. The first name she gave was Marlon Brando. He was what she called a man of genius and destruction, all in one. Dickinson believed that he was the most skilled performer, and she did say that Brando was cursed because he was so smart. It was impossible for him to be happy with himself. Everyone loved and hated him at the height of his fame, and she worked next to him and saw how he changed. In a low voice, she said, he wanted the truth in a business built on lies. That was his tragedy. Dickinson thought Brando was the perfect paradox, an artist whose sensitivity made him great on the outside but broke him on the inside. She said that Steve McQueen, another popular person, was doomed by the desire for power. Angie really liked how ruggedly beautiful McQueen was. It was very important to him to hurt himself, but she couldn't ignore it. Steve was always running away, from the studios, from love, and from himself. She said he could be hot and cool at the same time. He told them that even though he seemed really cool, he was actually a traveler who never put his trust in happiness. He was beautiful to look at, she told me, but he couldn't get away from his sadness. Then she talked about Burt Reynolds, a close friend and usual co-star, who made her feel bad. She went on, Burt was damned by pride. He needed to be loved, but he wouldn't say it. Dickinson recalled him as a man who laughed and strutted around to hide how weak he was. He was the kind of guy who could make everyone laugh, but when everyone left, he was by himself. She said that Hollywood's fierce desire for youth and vanity cast a shadow over his success, even though he had a lot of hits. We now have the 4th name on her list, Montgomery Clift. Dickinson had always looked up to Clift, even though they had never worked together. He was one of the most beautiful men I ever saw on screen, she noted, but his soul was at war with itself. Angie had heard many stories about how kind and suffering Clift was, as well as how smart he was and how much he suffered. She added with thought that he was cursed because people couldn't accept him for who he really was. That kind of pain is done to Hollywood people who are too sensitive. She also talked about Richard Burton and said that love had doomed him. She said that his relationship with Elizabeth Taylor was one of the most beautiful and sad in movie history. Richard could read Shakespeare like it was his own breath, she said. He did, however, love Elizabeth very much, a storm. Because they loved each other, they burned each other to death. Dickinson understood how much they were suffering and admired their ability. He was damned not because he was bad, she thought, but because he became hooked on love. She picked James Dean 6th, but she said he was damned by youth. Andy never met Dean, but she could still feel his power all over Hollywood, even though he had died a long time ago. It was like he was the ghost that never left. Young artists hoped to be like him and were afraid they would become like him. She saw that he was smart and charming, but she also saw, in his short life, a terrible lesson about how fame can be dangerous. It made her sad to say. He died quickly, but his shadow lived on forever. Robert Mitchum was the last person Dickinson talked about. She said this man was damned for refusing to give up. Early in her career, they worked together, and she would never forget how much he believed in her or how he didn't follow American movie rules. Bob didn't care what the studio wanted, she laughed. He played by his own rules, and that scared people. She said that Mitchum was a brave but headstrong man who would not be tamed. He wasn't damned by weakness, she made it clear. He was damned because he refused to bow. Dickinson sat still for a moment after writing down the 7 and then said, "I don't mean damned as an insult. It's true, so I say it. They were great men, but they were doomed to fail because they were too human in a field that doesn't allow it." She thought that each of these famous people represented both the best and worst of old-fashioned Hollywood. She finally said, "Those were the brightest stars. Stars that are very bright always fade too quickly." Angie Dickinson did not judge them in her own polished way. She was nice to them. Her words weren't about scandal. They were about getting to the bottom of things. Someone who lived through the movie's golden age is the only one who could know that. She smiled and said, "In a way, we were all damned, but that's what made us real."